Welcome to Contemporary Black Voices, where we talk about issues affecting the Black community. My name is Dr. Sharon Michael Chadwell, and with me are three gentlemen who are oftentimes called my brothers. We have Caleb Alexander, who is a New York Times bestseller author, Fred Williams, who is also an author and former professor, and then we have Chris Dawkins, who is a community activist and entrepreneur. Today's subject warrants a trigger warning, as it's a very sensitive topic, and that topic is suicide. In 2021, a report by the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, there was a significant increase in 19.2% suicides among African American Black persons. And then we've seen a significant increase of suicides among young Black persons aged 10 to 24. Now, suicide is a complex problem related to multiple factors, such as relationship, job, and schools, financial problems, and even mental illness, substance abuse, social isolation, historical trauma, and barriers to healthcare, and just an easy access to lethal means of suicide for persons at risk. So in 2003, suicide was the 16th leading cause of death overall for African Americans. And this is something I didn't even know. On an average day in the United States, one African American dies by suicide every 4.5 hours. So that is 28,177,000 suicides recorded among African Americans from the period of 1990 to 2003. So today we have seated with us Favor Campbell, who is an adjunct professor in sociology and demography, as well as teaches a course related to health disparities in families and society. So before we get started, let me remind you to hit the like button and subscribe buttons in YouTube. Favor, welcome to the panel.
Thank you all for having me today.
So when we think about suicide, and I'm gonna think of it as I was growing up and even to this day, we often thought about it as a white person's thing. So what's happening? Why the shift?
Well, two things. First of all, I relate to this topic professionally and personally. Ironically, we just met a year ago, and then we hadn't seen each other in a year, and then just last weekend our paths intersected, and so she asked me about this topic. So there's just a lot that I'm excited about to share because it's a much needed topic. As you stated, it's an issue for everybody, white, Hispanic, Asian, but a lot of times we get overlooked as Black people. So there has been a shift when it comes to higher suicide rates amongst us as Black people. If I can, I want to go through a few statistics to kind of answer your question, because I think that will kind of help put this in perspective. The statistics you gave already are accurate. There's two things happening. So there's suicide rates amongst all people, but then there are specific rates amongst Black people that, again, often get overlooked. So what's happening is we actually have lower suicide rates in comparison to white people, but our rates of suicide are growing. So the trajectory for us is going much higher than it is for white people. Even though we don't take our lives as often as they do, our rates of suicide are growing. So according to the CDC, from the time frame of 2018 to 2021, Black people, African Americans, saw the largest increase in suicides among people ages 10 to 24. I think we have that statistics. It's actually almost 40% the increase that we've had from previous years. Ages 25 to 44, about 23%. From 2000 to 2020, so if we expand that time frame, so about 20 years, Black youth from the ages of 10 to 19 experienced the largest increase, almost 80%. So in 20 years, we've gotten that high. Always hard to talk about children with this topic, but from the ages of 5 to 12, Black children are twice as likely to take their lives in comparison to white counterparts. So that's the statistics that we're seeing now, is that our rates of suicide are continuously growing at a quicker rate than any other race here in the United States. A few other statistics so we can kind of focus in on African Americans. 2020, year for every single person due to the pandemic. Suicides, you talked about, it was the 16th, 17th leading cause of death in 2003. In 2020, the third leading cause of death for Blacks for African Americans ages 15 to 24. The death rate for suicide for Black or African American men, not 2 times, not 3 times, but 4 times higher than that of Black women. So that tells us that Black men are suffering in silence. So that's the reason, we want to have this conversation. Society is full of trauma that we as Black people a lot of times have not dealt with. It's always been stigmatized. It's been that kind of dirty little secret, or it brings about shame for a lot of African Americans. I think a lot of times as African Americans, we as family members, we take that shame upon ourselves. Like, we don't want to be seen as our family member decided to take their lives. And so that stigma, that shame has always been there. We're getting it a little bit better. You see a lot of celebrities use their platform to talk about mental health, but we still have a long way to go. When we have a 78% increase, almost 80% in 20 years, there's something going on there that we have to address.
So going back to our babies,
Yes.
our especially elementary school, and the microaggressions that they're facing, is that the only thing that could be triggering this decision to, as we say, unalive themselves?
Sure. Even the language around suicide is changing. We don't say commit suicide anymore. We say someone died by suicide, or unalived, or something in that realm. Microaggressions, yes, but there's so much more. One of the things that I talk about in my health disparities class, and disparities is just a big word for differences. There are health disparities that are massive. The way we get treated in the healthcare system, the rates of us going to the doctor, there's reasons behind that, of course. But it's not just, it's microaggressions, yes. There's this concept called ACEs. It's short for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So what that looks at, basically it's a questionnaire. It's about 7-8 questions, and it looks at trauma that children have gone through. And I always have a soft spot for trauma, because think about, as adults, how difficult it is for us to process trauma, to lose a loved one, all the big adult issues, right? So imagine being a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, and you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, your parents getting divorced, domestic violence, sexual assault. These are the big traumas we're talking about. And if you check mark more than 3 or 4, definitely all 7 or 8, your likelihood for health issues goes up, your likelihood for dying by suicide goes up, all of these things. So it's all these traumas that a lot of times we do not take the time to help our children through, to give them the resources, the safe space that they need to deal with those traumas. And then those traumas stay with you as you become an adult, and if you haven't dealt with them.
How would a parent know? What would be, you just have a just not a educated person like you on this issue. How are they going to detect this with their children?
That's it's a complicated question, right? Because as a parent myself, I have a 17-year-old daughter. Her and I are super close. I know at any moment something's off, I can tell. But every parent, that doesn't make me a better parent or make me or anything like that. Every parent is different. So I have to be mindful to say, maybe she gets to a point and she could hide her behavior. I hid my behavior from my parents, and not because I was trying to be mischievous, because I didn't know how to express I was having a bad day, and I didn't want to burden them, so let me just kind of keep it to myself. So that's a tricky one, because a lot of times, we blame parents. We say, how could you not know or see the changes in your child? we've all probably been able to hide or put a mask on to, I mean, at some point, and so we have to, as adults, do our due diligence to check in on our children, be intentional, asking them how they're doing. We can't pull it out of them, but being intentional about asking, how was your day? How was school? Who are you hanging around? What's going on? Asking those questions. So when they do change, then we can hopefully catch it.
You had a question, Chris?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Ms. Favor, for being here and speaking about this.
Sure.
The question that I have is, are there any statistics between before social media and social media now? And because we see so many kids being kids to each other, saying, hey, take your life, do this, do that, or whatever. So can we attribute any of this to the social media?
Absolutely, 100%. In my personal world, I'm not a big social media fan because of what I've seen it turn into. In my professional life, I see what it does to young people. I teach college students for a living. It's their world. Social media is not going anywhere, but there's a lot of negativity on there. It's a different time and space. And so it used to be you could leave the school bully at school and go home and hopefully have a safe space. The bully follows you home now, and says horrible things. We call it keyboard courage. You can say whatever, anything online. Yes, it absolutely impacts. To your question, yes, I don't have them in front of me, but there are statistics that have shown X amount of time on social media, it contributes to it, and so again, monitoring that and making sure that we do our due diligence as adults to make sure that, when and how, and, kids find ways though,
Let me follow up with one additional question. In our production meeting, we were talking about this and, you coming, and Dr. Chadwell was saying, well, we need to have this discussion. So my question was, how do we have this discussion? I mean, I'm not going to bring it up at the barbecue,
absolutely.
Or something like
I totally get it. Yeah.
So how do you begin to talk about this?
We're doing it now, finding these platforms. I'll kind of tie in a little bit of my personal story. So we're in 2023. So last summer, as in 2022, I lost my older brother to suicide, May 28th of 2022.
May I ask how old?
My brother at the time was 45.
Okay.
Yes. And so, I'll bring that up a little bit more in just a bit. But to answer your question, it's tough, right? It's the room killer. It's the buzz killer. Nobody wants to, like you said, go to the barbecue and be like, oh, so Favor, tell me about what, that's just that's not what happens, right? But continuously doing this, I couldn't do it right when I got back from home for me is California after dealing with everything there. The semester I went back to teaching, I couldn't address it, but every semester since then, I address it a little bit more because I know it's important. I don't see it as shame. I see it as if I can do this and help one person to not be in that space or to share this story and give it to somebody else. So it's awkward, even now, the people know, my close friends, they don't really bring it up. How do you bring it up? I have one friend who will check in every now and again, like, how are things with you and your brother with dealing with that? But it's tough. It's tough. So we got to use our platforms. I, as someone who am the survivor of someone who took their life, I step into that space, so hopefully we can spread the word and somebody can share this video, and we just got to use our platforms.
Well, with that being said, I know that Caleb has some questions here.
Sure.
But we're going to go ahead and stop this segment and come back for another segment of questions with Favor Campbell.